chefs will start in restaurants putting seasonal asparagus on their menu that's from Spain, and they'll keep doing that until it goes into the English season. So no one really notices that actually it's got nothing to do with the British season at all. Whereas we're holding off for the British season, and people are going, why haven't you got asparagus on your menu? And we're saying, because it's not in season. Yeah, but it was down the road, but it's not in season in this country because people don't know. And they were dirt cheap and no one was using them. And I would say within 5 years, they were really expensive and they were going on the red list. And restaurants can do that. It's extraordinary that we make money, and I find it extraordinary that other restaurants aren't making an absolute fortune, because our dry store is 5 times the price of their dry store, and my olive oil is 5 times the price, my chickpeas, everything in there. Our veg will probably be 1.5 to 2 times the price, and the same with our meat. And I get challenged on that sometimes, how do you feel about not, that you're exclusive, you're only feeding one group of people who can afford it. And my answer to that is that group of people should be spending their money as ethically as possible. Making us feel bad because we haven't recycled a tin and can makes me so very, very angry. Supermarkets rarely sell food. I just can't believe what they're selling. It's absolutely horrifying. And the amount of ultra-processed food in there is just terrifying.
What role do restaurants have in building and shaping a sustainable food culture?
I think restaurants are absolutely fundamental in this, and I've been fascinated watching it build over the years. So I opened my first pub in 1998. It was fully organic, and everything I did was...
the world's first organic pub.
The world's first organic pub, exactly. It's the world's first certified organic pub. And continue to be the only certified pub through most of the time we were open, because it's actually really quite hard work, and I've gone completely off piste here, but I've just got to give you this. And so the EU changed, after we'd opened and got certified, the EU changed the guidelines and restaurants no longer had to be certified. So that meant no one bothered. So you just put organic on your menu, which was a shame, but we continued to be, which was great. But so there, way back, 1998, I had a fish policy. No one had a fish policy, so we didn't sell any of the common fish. We sold gurnard, coley, pollock, razor clams, and they were dirt cheap and no one was using them. And I would say within 5 years, they were really expensive and they were going on the red list. And restaurants can do that. So I used to have free pig's trotters, skin, heads, all of that kind of stuff. No one was using them. And then restaurants start using them and they suddenly become valuable assets, and they're used everywhere. So then you get crisps, there's more pork scratchings in bags in shops. So they have a profound effect on our eating habits, and how restaurants... your average restaurant, fish is a really good example, stopped using cod and salmon and started using more variety. We shouldn't just target a species, it just needs more variety. It would change people's eating habits at home.
Do you feel that, I'd say quite a big trend at the moment is zero waste, and people saying here we're using carrot tops or broccoli stalks, and they're saying we're doing this to save the world. Do you think that it's a little bit narrow-minded, just venturing down the zero waste? Because I feel like there's a huge amount that's going in, and one of the examples is, I can't remember what it was, a massive restaurant, fast food chain, and they realised that if they just took a cucumber down by a third and use the ends or something, end up saving millions of pounds. But zero waste is one side, and I think a lot of people who are individuals who feel very hopeless about the climate, they use it as a way to feel like they're doing something, that they feel like they are in control. Do you think restaurants actually need to be looking at actually spearheading foods that are more unknown to make them more known in a diet, like perennial foods? Or are we just always going to fall into the trap, like you mentioned before with other examples, like the lesser known fish, that whatever restaurants choose, there is a danger of essentially eating that to extinction?
It's an interesting question. I have a real problem with wild food. We're trying to set aside land for biodiversity, for the creatures, and if restaurants continue to make a big thing about harvesting from the wild, it is going to destroy the wilderness. I think it's really worrying. I don't like it. Apart from anything else, going out and harvesting wild food for commercial benefit feels very wrong to me. I'm really torn about that one, and it depends what it is, of course. If you were harvesting say hawthorn leaves in the spring for your salad, well, that's going to be harmless. There's so much hawthorn. But if you're out harvesting rare mushrooms or even just some of the little herbs you're seeing in the flower beds, in the hedgerows, it's a really bad idea. So I do think there's a lot of danger, and we have to be careful. I think restaurants like we said with fish, have an incredible role to play in changing how we eat vegetables, and cauliflower's been a fantastic example. And it's kicked off with restaurants and cookery writers who are often restaurant based anyway, and then off we go and we change a whole culture about how we eat cauliflower. I mean, that is really exciting. Cauliflower was cauliflower cheese and nothing else, and everyone hated it, and now everyone loves it. It's really wonderful.
So based on that, do you think that there's how have you seen the attitude to vegetables and less known vegetables over the past few years, and what kind of things are you doing with your kind of your latest project, the Bull Inn in Totnes? Because the thing that I experienced that blew my mind was the kohlrabi tacos. And I think that is kind of just such a lovely way of saying, like, there's something that's common, or it's rare, or people are just like, what is this extraterrestrial looking like vegetable? That actually you can turn it into something really enjoyable. But that feels like you need quite a skilled creative outlook to take something like a kohlrabi and to think taco.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of two separate issues. One is that restaurants can absolutely get people to deeply engage with vegetables, as we were saying. So we make a kohlrabi taco, we slice it very thin, and then that becomes the taco. So that gives you the inspiration at home to think, and you will go beyond the taco. There'll be all sorts of things you might do in there. I mean, I've got some leftover tuna kind of mayonnaise thing that I made that would just be incredible in that. It would be so nice in the fridge. And then you might be inspired to use it in a stir fry as you might, what was that called? The little balls of, I've forgotten what they're called, used to get in tin cans when I was little.
I have no
Chinese, anyway.
Water chestnuts.
Water chestnuts,
Yeah.
There you go. So, they're very similar to that. So they work really well. So you try it in a restaurant, and then you go home and start experimenting at home, which is absolutely brilliant. I think it's great to be only expanding people's interest in different types of veg. I can't think how that would be a problem, except for the wild harvesting, as I was saying. So that then it becomes dangerous. What was the second part to that question? We're as bad as each.
Yeah, that's fine.
Brilliant. Maybe we should like
I might
take notes.
Yeah. I think the second part. The creativity sides.
Oh,
of
yes,
it.
yes,
Like
okay.
having, because you need a certain kind of brain to look at a kohlrabi and to think taco.
So when it comes to cooking, I mean, you were talking about waste earlier as well. So when it comes to cooking from scratch in restaurants and really using those ingredients in season, depending on what the weather's like, so they might not come anyway, even if you have planned it, you have to have a skilled kitchen. So you have to have a team of chefs who really understand how to replace the kohlrabi because it's not arrived because the weather was bad and the farmer couldn't get the tractor into the field or whatever it is that's prevented that crop being harvested that time. And that takes an awful lot of work in recruiting those kind of people. But on the other hand, chefs so rarely get the opportunity to cook from scratch, so rarely get the opportunity to get really beautiful fresh veg into their kitchen and decide and work out what to do with it and be creative, make their own stock, make their own bread, make their own ice cream. Everything is made in our pub. And so you get an incredible caliber of chef who doesn't leave. I mean, our team have been with us since the beginning, pretty much the whole kitchen team.
Why do you think?
A few people
Why do you
come
think
and
that?
gone.
Do you think it's because you give them that opportunity to express that creative side?
And absolutely, there's absolutely no doubt that's a huge part of it. But that wouldn't work without paying them well, giving them decent hours, being utterly kind to each other all the time. You know, there's no shouting or abuse in our kitchen. If anything happens, we kick him really, really quickly. I mean, way beyond that. We're way beyond that level of Gordon Ramsay world. We're in real, genuine care and kindness in how we operate in the kitchen, and it's really important.
But I think that the question is like very often you think of the idea of like a kitchen or like watching The Bear or all of these different TV shows. It has to be militant, disciplined, like no fine margins in order to actually have a successful restaurant.
Yeah.
And then a lot of these end up not being successful. So could you maybe just chat a little bit about the economics regarding where you think, like, how can there be, because I think the lovely thing about food is it's one of the few things that can connect everyone. We can sit down at a table, we can share a meal, we can share ideas. And I think like a restaurant, the old term for restaurant was restorative, or to restore. And I think restaurants can restore communities, but in order to do that, you got to bring everyone together, but it also has to make kind of economic sense. And I know restaurants are really struggling in this day and age. So what do you do to try and make your restaurants a success? And based off that, it's also probably my interest personally is you seem to have a thing about pubs.
Oh, we do, very, very much. And yes, that's because well, I don't know. Well, I'll tell you about my thing about pubs. But first of all, I love restaurants being restorative. I think that's a really beautiful way of putting it, and being part of the community. And that's very, very important to me. So with restaurants, but also pubs. Pubs are part of the community. They've been a fundamental part of our communities since they were built. Communities were built around pubs. I mean, the pub was often the first thing to arrive. And I think it's absolutely criminal that they're getting shut down. I think it's appalling. I've never changed a pub name. I keep as much about it as original as I possibly can, because it is a piece of beautiful history on our street corners that, like you said, brought communities together. When I first started opening pubs in 1998, there were all sorts of people who wouldn't invest in me because it was alcohol based. And they said that, you know, it was just damaging to the communities. But that narrative changed within about 10 years. As pubs started to disappear, we started to see how fundamentally important they were to drinking culture, actually. Because when you're out drinking in a community knows you're drinking, so they're looking after you to a certain extent. You know, it's not a given, but if somebody's drinking too much or getting too drunk, the community is saying, you've had too much, let me help you get you home. Was John all right last night? He seemed, you know. And if you're doing it at home, that's lost. And then there's all the connection, layers and layers of it lost. It's absolutely tragic. So I'm deeply passionate about pubs.
I would say like pubs are a little bit like like the village centre or the village hall, really.
Yeah.
And it's where it's a very British thing.
It is.
I think.
Well, I don't know, because it's only in the term pub. I mean, they do it a lot in Australia as well, but then, you know, obviously.
Where did they get that from?
Yeah, exactly. And then all over Europe, you know, bistros, community bars. I mean, the French are great at their community bars, aren't they? And they are still there with all the old geezers sitting around outside having a drink together, which is lovely. But I don't think we value it enough in this country. It's really shocking. But and also our cultures change somehow in how we drink and how we hang out in pubs. So food is really important to pubs now. I find it a bit sad at the Bull that we are food all the way across the pub now, and I've always in all my pubs. And one of the ways I explain what the difference is between a pub and a restaurant and a bistro is, one, you have beer on draft, and the second is you have areas where you don't have to eat, you can just drink, and that it's always open to everyone to just drink. And we barely have that at the Bull now. It was a post-pandemic thing, and it was a post-pandemic, you know, first of all, you had to sit and all that, had to sit and, you know, everything you had to do around it. But, you know, it's also back to the economics. So in order, obviously, to leave tables just for drinkers, you're losing quite a lot of sales, and we are full all the time with eaters, obviously, and people.
I was there on Monday night and it was full. Yeah. And I was like, you don't often see that. Yeah. That's quite something.
So how do I say to my team, actually, no, you're not serving food on these tables? Because it's also, so the reason why, I mean, obviously it's my business and I can make all those decisions, but we have a profit share, and it's really important that the team have complete control over their turnover. I think it's absolutely essential that they understand and see what's happening and understand the cost of everything and how we make profit or not. And in answer to your question about economics, it's extraordinary that we make money, and I find it extraordinary that other restaurants aren't making an absolute fortune, because our dry store is 5 times the price of their dry store, and my olive oil is 5 times the price, my chickpeas, everything in there. Our veg will probably be 1.5 to 2 times the price, and the same with our meat, same with our booze, everything. And then on top of that, I buy organic linen, I buy green energy, everything is more expensive. So the downside to that obviously is my bottom line. The upside to it is marketing. So people love it. So I knew when I was going out to eat in restaurants, and when I first started working in restaurants, I was so shocked by the way they traded, flying lamb from New Zealand because it was cheaper, not paying their staff properly, just using the cheapest ingredients possible and overworking them and then serving them to customers. And I just thought that was revolting, and that there were people like me who wanted to know that staff were paid properly and that the food they were eating was decent and had come from a decent supply chain. So that was kind of the whole motivation for the Duke of Cambridge, my first organic pub, and it was hugely successful. Back then, 1998, within 4 months, I broke even on just having a restaurant. And within the first year, I made enough money to open my second pub. So, a couple of 100,000. It was huge. And I was paying everyone a minimum wage. They were on contracts. They had sick pay, I think, but no holiday, because none of this was legal then. And all the years I was waitressing, I wasn't paid. I only lived off my tips. I mean, really gross work behaviour. This is what the Tory government wanted back to get us out of the European Convention on Human Rights. And but the cost of everything was so cheap. Energy was cheap. Despite the fact I was paying people a decent wage, it was still cheap compared to now. Everything was. Rent was always pretty expensive. You turn it over to now, and there's another part of me that really doesn't understand how anyone makes money in restaurants. And to take my restaurant as it is, without the rooms, we'd struggle to make money. We really would. So that's part of the holding it up. But ultimately, we stock take every single week. Every dish is costed. I mean, when you were talking about not wasting the end of the cucumber earlier, I was just kind of looking and thinking, well, really? Is that not just bloody logical? Like, why would you waste that? Why would you waste any food in your kitchen? And my team know that. Because everything's costed. So they're looking at how much that is and what the margin is on that dish and how they could get them more margin if they did that. So it's all in their control and thinking and power to manage these things. And I give them a complete free rein. So they have autonomy. I micromanage people for about 6 months.
You whip them into line.
Well, I just watch really closely and kind of give my opinion, but I am watching really closely.
What are you watching for? What kind of qualities?
How they treat people, actually how they respond to criticism and improvement, learning and improving, and that it's a positive action, not a defensive action. And often I teach people that, I just have to keep saying, honestly, this isn't a criticism. I just want to learn what went wrong and how we're going to make it work better next time. And as long as we continue on that process and I can see them going, that went wrong, I'm going to do it this way, then we're on, we're on for a winner. Honesty, really important. I want to know everything. Don't hide stuff from me, because I'm not going to be punitive. I'm going to be solutions driven up to a point, and then I'll sack you.
Because it is a business at the end of the day.
Yeah, it is. And actually, I think employing someone who's not good at their job and keeping them in that job, you're doing them a real disservice. You are actually not doing them a favour at all, because you're making someone feel continually inadequate because they can't do it. So move on and find something that works for you, and we'll put someone here it works for them, and then I can completely set them free and they have real autonomy and then love their jobs because you've got autonomy. Have you ever seen the Dan Pink little
What is that?
do you know, I'm not exactly sure. I think he must be a philosopher. I'm not exactly sure. I've only ever seen this video of his, and it's about what motivates people, and it's not money. So he goes through this brilliant video about it, and he ends with, it's autonomy, mastery, purpose that motivates people. So you have to feel you have the right to make decisions. You have to feel you're improving, so you're developing as a human, and that there's purpose in your life. What you're doing is actually being effective in society and the environment.
That's interesting, because I've heard another take on motivation where it's essentially the opposite of deprivation, where you feel deprived of something, and so I think a lot of people in today's day and age actually feel deprived of purpose, of belonging, of community, of feeling that they have their own thing. And so by creating a job where they do have that autonomy and that they do feel that purpose is a very beautiful thing, but it's quite a risky thing, because I wouldn't say it's like I'd say like a lot of people, if they're setting up a new business, they have their mind how they want to do it, and everyone has to follow their orders. And so essentially you have to be like, do you have to be open to being wrong, or
Totally.
you're never wrong?
No, I love that. I love it. So everyone on all the different aspects of the business, from housekeeping to kitchen porter to Phil, who runs the overall business, is the expert in their area. So for the head chef not to respect what the housekeeper's saying about what's needed would be so ignorant and actually setting yourself up for failure. But you have to give the housekeeper the respect and autonomy and confidence to feel that they can come to you and say, I can't do my job because this person's doing this, and that this isn't going to be a punitive conversation. This is a constructive, forward-looking, solutions-driven conversation. So, yeah, I think I slightly lost my thread on that.
But you're constantly like, essentially, it's not so much about ego, because I think in kitchens as well, there's a big thing with like ego and not wanting to be wrong.
Yeah.
But essentially, it's in order to be right, you have to be wrong. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. No egos. Definitely no egos in our business. I just don't think we, and actually egos can't handle it. And right early, they know they really can't. Right early on, I mean, the amount of male chefs that I employed that said, I can't work here. They just couldn't do it because they weren't allowed to shout. They had to sit down and talk about it. If they had a problem, we would sit down and work it out and find a solution, and they could not do it.
Did you pity them though?
I did feel sorry for them, but they're a massive journey for them to go on, absolutely huge. And they were, on a lesser level, I've worked with people and taken them through that journey, which is really interesting. God, there's so many times the team direct me. Well, a bit like what I was saying about them wanting to keep food in the front of the bar, and I really don't want it. I'd rather it was just drinking. But when we talk about it as a group, and they override me and say, no, it's got to be like this. And we hear you and totally get what you're trying to get. But no, we really don't want to do that. And if I want them to enjoy their jobs and do the best for the business always, because that's our goal, our joint goal is to make this business succeed, then I have to give them the right to make those decisions. And the point of making this business succeed is not about me making money. I hate that aspect of entrepreneurs. And I used to work for people who'd say that, well, I need more profit this year. Like, do I care? Really? That you can't afford your kids' private school education if I don't work harder for you? No, I don't care at all, actually. What I do care about is how people are employed, what the supply chain's like, and what the impact of that supply chain is on society and the environment. And we all know in our business, the reason why we're doing it is to improve society and the environment. As simple as that. And I don't want it for any other reason. So we're putting 700,000-800,000 of salaries into the local economy, and we reckon we're putting in about 1.2 million in supply chain into the local economy, and it's huge. It's a really big impact on small, independent, ethically driven businesses. And if we all traded like that, if we all thought like that about business, and it's about trade, it is not about individual profit. And that's the problem that we've had in society across the globe, that it's all about the market and individual profit rather than the humanity and environment.
What in your life has made you care so much about humanity and the environment? Because I think everyone has their own story of how they got there, and I'm interested to hear yours.
I was indoctrinated.
Were you?
Yeah. I remember Anita Roddick saying that who set up the Body Shop, saying she set up creches and she did it specifically to indoctrinate young children into environmentalism. I just thought, I'm with you there, sister, because indoctrination's a bit dodgy, but I actually think there is a place to say, things have to be differently. I'm going to teach you how. So I grew up in a commune in Herefordshire from the age of 2 to 16, and we were politically driven, kind of anarchistic hippies, I'd call us. We grew all our own fruit and veg. We bought from the local co-op. So who do I still use? Suma.
Oh yeah.
So I grew up with them in the commune, and I've used them all the way through my businesses and my supply chain. So I love it. So they've like taken me through my life, this beautiful co-op. And supper was 30 people talking about politics every night. And
how did you find that, as a 10-year-old?
It was fantastic. I loved it. And we were treated we were expected to have a basic knowledge of it. We did have a basic knowledge, so we could join in and we could sit and talk about how school was and kind of analyse how unhealthy we thought some of it was, which actually wasn't great for my education, I have to say, because we were very critical of the state system in the commune. But I had a different education there. It was so much more interesting than anything.
Do you feel like that's fair on a child to go through that critical outlook, or should a child just play?
No, I think it was brilliant. I mean, we played loads. We were usually a tribe, so 12 of us. Kids came and went, but there were 12 of us usually at any one time. So we had these incredible games, that was relentless. But it wasn't like we were being sat in lectures. We were sitting at supper, watching our parents argue, watching our parents critically challenge each other and critically think. And so that was really healthy for the kind of parental relationships. And then we had this other knowledge. I mean, what else would families be talking about over supper?
Well, they're not, or a lot aren't. They're watching TV.
Exactly.
I honestly think that family starts around the dinner table.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, everyone sits down, they share what they've been doing, what's in their mind. That's how I grew up, and it's such a lovely way, because it's like a voice for everyone, and now it's like it seems to be quite rare.
Yeah, I think it is quite unusual. But in that kind of nuclear family situation, there might be bickering and resentment between parents, and so there's lots going on there that's could be quite difficult, as well as good. Plenty of good too, but it depends how happy your family is. In that kind of communal life, that's diffused immediately at supper, so it's really good. And also other adults step in. So if you're having a problem with your parents, you've got other people to go to, and you know what their expertise is. So I might go to Jane for books, or Jock to go and play a game, or so it was an amazing way to bring up children.
I would say that's probably feels like how rural communities used to be like.
Yeah, absolutely. When it was safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, before we decided that strangers were dangerous.
Back to kind of like the restaurant side of things. One of the things that I've realised, because I work with my colleague Sam Cooper, he's a professional chef by trade, and we work together. So I grow all the stuff, and he does amazing ferments and all sorts, and it's great fun. But one of the things that we believe is that growing or producing food and the cooking of it is two sides of the same coin, in a sense. It's like for me, cooking starts when I sow a seed, or growing finishes when it's in your belly, kind of thing, just as one continuous thing. Whereas at the moment, I feel like these are two very, very different fields, and there seems to be this massive barrier between the producers and the farmers, and the chefs and the restaurants. And so one of the things that I don't know, I feel like it's being overused, the term seasonal. I feel like almost every restaurant loves to just throw in seasonal as like a buzzword. And I wanted to hear from you, with your credibilities, what is what is actually seasonal, because I think it's a little bit confused, or it's just something that people do as a box ticking exercise to look good.
Okay, so a couple of things there. When I first opened the Duke it's in 1998, trading standards would come in and ask questions. They would come in and say, prove that that's local. Where does it come from? Explain what you mean. What does seasonal mean? You know, they literally would ask you those questions.
Really?
Prove that it's organic. This would be a couple of times a year, and you just had to prove everything. And I there was a place that labelled itself wild and organic or something, and I went in and looked around. It was like a kind of supermarket thing, and I was just like, there is nothing wild in here. This is just a lie. So I reported the trading standards, and they had to change the name and the signage. I mean, that's how it was post the last Labour government while we were still in the EU. The Tory government, who were red tape, trying to cut red tape, 1 in 3 out is what they ended in if you wanted to bring in a law, and then slash trading standards funding. So I think they were down to 30% of what they were back then. There's no one questioning anything. Absolutely nobody asks you a single question. So why would a restaurant bother to actually justify the word seasonal, local, organic? You don't have to, because nobody's going to question you. No one ever questions us about the claims we make, which just blows my mind. Yeah, I do. I would really like it, because I can prove all of it. And
you're like, this is my chance.
But so a restaurant and also it's so easy to say, okay, we're going to buy this organic lamb from our neighbour next door. So menu on our lambs on our menu is organic. He hasn't got any this week. Oh, we'll just get it from, so-and-so or that supplier or whatever. But it's still there on the menu, organic lamb, because why would they change it? How would they know? How does the sous chef know that this isn't the lamb? Blah, 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 and off you go. And there it is, a lie on the menu, because there's no one holding it to account, which is, it's very, very depressing. Oh, yeah, okay, what's seasonal? So for me, it's very strict. It's field grown, and genuinely in season from this country. But then you have seasons from around the world, and that matters. I'm perfectly happy to buy tropical fruit if it's fair trade, and you can't produce it in this country. We've done it for hundreds of years. Why not? But that has to be in season in the right country. I think asparagus is a classic a seasonal mess up that we have. So everyone kind of knows when it's in season. Chefs will start in restaurants putting seasonal asparagus on their menu that's from Spain, and they'll keep doing that until it goes into the English season. So no one really notices that actually it's got nothing to do with the British season at all. Whereas we're holding off for the British season, and people are going, why haven't you got asparagus on your menu? And we're saying, because it's not in season. Yeah, but it was down the road. Yeah, but it's not in season in this country because people don't know. And all those years ago when I opened the first place, chefs didn't know. I cannot tell you, it was mind-blowing that even a pepper or an apple, or the kind of really, they'd know strawberries. It seriously didn't know a season of an apple. I mean, really, really shocking stuff. They're not taught it in college. They're not taught anything about it in college. It's ridiculous.
To me, that almost echoes from what I've heard, because I haven't experienced this, but I've heard, like, with doctor training, very little is trained about the diet and gut health.
Yeah, I think they have a day. Same with the menopause. They only have a day on the menopause as well. 50% of the population seriously struggling, and they don't get trained on it. It's extraordinary. It's really basic. The diet stuff does my head in. My daughter was getting permanent migraines. We ended up at Torbay Hospital, and the specialist said we can put her on a medicine that might give her liver failure if she doesn't drink enough water, aged 8, right? So her dad said, is there any foods that might be triggering it? And he said, yeah. He said bread, chocolate, and Chinese food. I mean, I'm going to fucking swear at that. Chinese food, he means MSG. MSG's in Pringles more than it is in Chinese food. I mean, like, racist. And also, he never suggested. He didn't even ask if we'd try taking her off those foods before he medicated her. He still didn't. Even after that conversation, he didn't ask, is she eating any of those foods? I mean, mind-blowing. Just mind-blowing.
Did you then go down a route of diet change for her?
No, we'd already done all that. We knew that stuff.
Yeah.
And no, we didn't put her on the medicines either. We changed to school, and that did it.
Wow. And what about you now, if I can ask, like going through the menopause, is there certain foods or diets that you find help you, or
I'm just on nice drugs. HRT works perfectly, so I don't have to think about anything. I should probably drink less because it definitely is a bit triggering for world sweats. So it makes hot flushes worse, alcohol. So I've got a choice, a drink or a hot flush.
that is a tough choice. And what's like kind of sticking more with the diet side of things, I feel that, or almost like flavor. I think like maybe one of the battles is, and I want to hear, because when we were chatting before, you gave me a couple of examples of where you took, like with everyone's like, you need to offer Sunday roast, and you're like, no, we're not actually going to offer it, and no one's complained. I think one of the things that some like restaurants who are maybe trying to explore and push the boundaries and be more sustainable, they might feel that, okay, I want to be able to offer seasonal food and to just be seasonal, but I'm worried that people are going to complain that they're not going to have their like fish and chips or something, or that the flavour that the consumer expects it all year round suddenly isn't going to be available for them.
I think it's very different. It's completely different to cooking at home. If you're trying to cook at home seasonally, it's quite hard work. You know, you've got leeks and kale and even struggling to get onions if you were in the early spring. And we did actually at one point in London, we went really brutally strict on just the home counters of London. So we did run out of onions. We used leeks instead, and it worked. I mean, the thing is, the customers don't notice because what they see is a design menu of maybe 8 to 12 dishes. And just because it's lentil and greens and meat based at that time of year, and well, what else might there be? Lots of root veg. What you see is a beautifully designed menu. So it's fine. But when you're at home, it's different. You've got to think once more, what am I going to do with leeks? And it's not the same in a kitchen. So we never, I mean, when we've been in deep, strict seasonality, we've never had complaints. No one's noticed. And then there are things like, there's leaves, salad leaves that will grow all year round in unheated polytunnels. So you've always got a little bit of fresh in there as well. I think restaurants, again, back to what we were saying about fish and how they can really influence our diets, have a role to play in that. They have a role to teach us why. We do not need tomatoes in winter. We just don't. And tin tomatoes work beautifully. And I'm quite excited about it. So we're hoping to open a pizza restaurant next year. And one of the conversations people continually say is, where are you going to get the tomatoes from? And I say, well, use tin tomatoes in winter. It will be a seasonal pizza restaurant. So in the summer, there will be fresh tomato. And in the winter, there will not. Live with it. But it's back to, so it's, you know, around that, what you were saying about choice. It's really important that you actually say to people sometimes, no, that doesn't work. So we're going to do it for you this way. And this is going to be really nice. And it's the whole basis of my business is saying, no, you do not have to have Schweppes tonic. You don't. They're evil people and I don't want to buy it. So when I first opened the Duke, there were no bar mixers because there was only Schweppes. So we used orange juice. We had plum juice, which was amazing from Biona. It was the best thing. So you had gin and plum or vodka and plum and people loved it. So come up to the bar, can I have a gin and tonic? No, I'm really sorry, we don't do it because we don't buy Schweppes, which was a complicated conversation. Then it's easier now. But try this plum juice, try this lager you've never tasted of before because you don't know any beers in my bar, none of them. They were all, everything was unknown. And then when you were just talking about the Sunday roast, so it is a very hard thing to do with organic potatoes. They're inconsistent in supply. You can't get the varieties you want. Actually doing a roast for 150 people really well when you're not just doing a nasty carvery is difficult. It's really hard to do well and fresh. So when I opened this pub, I said, we are not doing Sunday roast. We're just not going to do it. And everyone was like, ugh. No one cares because you give something else that's really wonderful. You provide, it's not like I'm saying you can't have that full stop. I'm saying try this instead.
I think one of the best things as well is just letting someone have that incredible food experience, and then you go afterwards and you say, oh, by the way, we actually ran out of onions, so we used leeks instead for your dish, and like,
Yeah, yeah.
And it's that little like, because the thing is like sometimes when you say it beforehand,
Yeah.
people will judge.
Yeah, they will.
So you got to be quiet, and
Yeah.
then you kind of flip it.
Yeah.
One of the things that you mentioned is a pizza restaurant.
Yeah.
Why? Are you bored? Like what is it about pizza?
It's a bit back to keeping the team happy, actually. So we bought, in lockdown, the fish and chip shop opposite had been empty for ages and ages. And I made one major fundamental mistake in opening that pub is that I hadn't factored in that waste collection is entirely different from London. You don't get daily collections around here, and some of them are every 2 weeks. So I'd put aside a storeroom about the size of my kitchen table for our waste collections, and it was an absolute nightmare. I mean, we actually had to close down the disabled loo for a while just to keep wasting because we couldn't handle it. Partly because we recycle, everything we can is recycled, massive compost bins, all that kind of thing. So really difficult. So the fish and chip shop was on the market, and we were like, well, okay, we could do with extra bedrooms. The rooms are full. We can do an apartment up there, and we'll do an ethical fish and chip shop, which I really like the idea of. And then we get all our storage. So motivation was the storage, but we had to build a business around it.
Wow. Priorities.
So the apartment's doing brilliantly, and then the fish and chip shop, the cost of living crisis hit. Energy prices, oil prices, potatoes and fish. I mean, everything went up, but those ones went up the most.
Do you think it was a sign?
It did feel like one. And fish and chip shops started closing all over the country. We're in a cost of living crisis, so I'm going to do a high-end chippy while everyone else is closing and no one's got any money. I think probably this won't work. And the point, when I say high-end, is that the prices will be more expensive. Everything I do is marginally more expensive, but only marginally. It's not dramatically, but it's more expensive than a cheap place. And I get challenged on that sometimes. How do you feel about not, that you're exclusive? You're only feeding one group of people who can afford it. And my answer to that is that group of people should be spending their money as ethically as possible, because the more they spend their money ethically, the more the market opens out and things will get cheaper and everyone can afford it. And it's really bloody important that we pinpoint every rich person in this country and say, you have no reason, no excuse to do anything but spend your money in a way that's affecting society and the environment.
That is a really powerful point.
It's good,
That's
isn't it?
I bet you're quite proud of that.
I am quite proud of
that is a really nice way of doing it. But it does bring me to the point, is like, the way that I see it is that especially kids, they should be having the most nutritious, best quality food. I think as a human right. I think all school meals should be organic as standard and stuff. And I don't know, is there any, do you feel that are you hopeful that there'll ever be a world where that would exist for kids, or do you we're so deep into the way that things are set up and bureaucracy and like lack of funding that we'll never have a society where all kids grow up on kind of like natural, proper food?
I am hopeful. I never give up with hope. No, I'll never change my behaviour and how I trade, because I think individual action is absolutely fundamental to how society is managed. And I believe that if we all change the way we spend our money, and certainly those who have the flexibility to, the world could change overnight. Just like that. Like if we all bought green energy, it would change like that.
Because it's like voting.
Yeah, it is. Really? You vote with every purchase that you make every single time.
So would you say it's a political act?
It's everything's a political act. I love politics though. I do love politics. I find it fascinating. But the children thing, and I absolutely fundamental that kids should be fed properly and should have access to good, healthy ingredients. But what hope have we with the way supermarkets behave at the moment? I mean, I never shop in supermarkets. I basically never have. Even when I was on the dole in London in my teens, I still didn't do them. And if I did cross into a supermarket, every single time I would go to a customer service desk and say, why are you making me have a plastic bag? And why do you not have more organic ingredients? Just log it every single time. And there's just a little story behind that. When I opened the Duke, there wasn't the Marks and Spencers and Sainsbury's started campaigning on organic food against each other. So they were doing these massive organic food campaigns. It was just beautifully timed for us because we were just made as part of the headline news. And a friend of mine's mum had been going into Sainsbury's every week and saying, why haven't you got organic bananas? I don't know why she was obsessed by organic bananas. It was just this one thing. She wanted organic. And Sainsbury's ran a campaign saying, yes, Mrs. Smith, we have your organic bananas. And she was called Mrs. Smith. I'm absolutely convinced it was my friend's mum. So that is the power of our pester power.
Pester power.
But yeah, to just keep challenging, keep asking why. And so whenever I say to a person in a shop, why are you giving me a plastic bag? And he says, well, my boss tells me to. And I say, well, tell your boss every customer complains and then he'll stop telling you to do it. I mean, like, they just want to know what the customers think. We have the power as workers to actually feed into that.
What's your opinion on largest, like, because that's like pester, like micro, it's not like a protest as such, but it's pester power. But what's your opinion on something like, it seems to be less of a thing now, but like Just Stop Oil or Extinction Rebellion and these kind of protests as a way of trying to get the message across with environmental.
I think they're absolutely fundamental.
You do?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, they've brought all sorts of topics to headline news. It's ever been thus. I was part of the South anti-apartheid protests when I was a kid. I got banned from Sainsbury's for putting anti-apartheid stickers all over South African fruit and those kind of agitated behaviours. I mean, for God's sake, the suffragettes, what more do you have to say? When you're not being listened to and something is really fundamental, there's no other way of getting through and breaking the system other than agitating, and it's got to happen. And I feel ashamed I'm not part of them. I do. I think, we're on the brink of climate catastrophe, on the fucking brink. You're from the age, I've been indoctrinated into this since I was a child. I knew about it when I was 6. I knew about it. They knew about it. The people in power knew about it. And I felt quite sure that by the time we got to the point that we were burning, that it would change. And it isn't. It's mind-blowing. We are on the brink. And Greenpeace was telling us 2030 will be the deadline, and here we are. They were saying that when I was a teenager, and here we are. So, yes, we have to have major agitated protest, and we need to cause trouble, and I wish I was part of it.
One of the things that that I hear a lot is it kind of like the public, or the public, whatever that even means, kind of get frustrated and they actually don't want to associate themselves. They're kind of scared. They don't want to associate themselves with these protesters if they actually care about the environment. And I feel in some cases it might actually polarize people.
Well, I suspect it does. I suspect it causes, but I suspect it was the same with the suffragettes. I don't think there was all out support for them, and it's not until people actually see what change means and that it's not going to be detrimental to their lives. Yes, you are going to have to get rid of your car. Yes, we're not going to be dependent on fossil fuel, but with that has to become an integrated transport system to help us move around. Otherwise, society will collapse. So change will happen in a healthy way ultimately. Men were so scared of women having the vote, for God's sake, it was all fine, we're all right. And still so little has changed. I mean, extraordinarily. One of the things that I think is really important when you're talking about action and what we do as individuals, so I talk about how we spend our money and how important that is, and I absolutely truly believe that we could change the world with how we spend our money. Guy, my husband, doesn't necessarily agree with me. It's one of the few things we do really argue about. I don't really understand why he doesn't agree with me.
I'll ask him.
Because I'm usually right. It's micro-shaming that, that making us feel bad because we haven't recycled a tin can makes me so very, very angry, because it's not your fault. It's not my fault. It's the leader's fault. It's the government. It's the system. It should be so simple that we don't even give it a second of thought, because it's set up. I mean, in France, you just put all your waste in one place and they separate it. That's exactly how it should be. And then the manufacturer should have the absolute requirement to make something disposable. And if it's not disposable, you can't make it. If you cannot prove that end of life for whatever you've created has a way of being gotten rid of that isn't causing forever chemicals in the environment and that isn't punitively expensive to recycle, you can't do it. And that should be the starting point of absolutely everything. And it is not our fault. It's not our fault. It's our fault because of the people we voted in. But even when we vote the right people in, the change doesn't happen. So what are we supposed to do other than protest? And then they've criminalised protest. And that's why most people are terrified of it. My daughter was really proactive in the Fridays for Future movement, Greta Thunberg's movement in Exeter. And they're all terrified. They won't do it anymore because they're so frightened of being criminalised.
I think like one of the thing is like people feel like they're treading on eggshells, and there's quite a like got you society. Like, oh, you. I think it's harder with especially younger people, like friend groups and younger people who actually care, but they might have roommates at like university, and there's like they do one thing and the roommate is, you didn't recycle that, or one thing, and like I almost find myself doing the same thing. It's like that guilt, and that is no way for a society to live, shrouded in guilt. And so I think sometimes it's so easy to forget that actually you're just a human at the end of the day, and you're part of this massive complicated society, and all you can do is your best. You don't have to be perfect. Perfection doesn't exist. You just got to do the best that you consciously can, so you're kind of like always moving forward.
So I talk about the conscious compromise at the pub. So everything we do, we look at and we consider it consciously. And sometimes it's compromise. Sometimes you have to say, well, we do have to buy gas. We've got no choice. So we have a little bit of gas in the pub. It's almost entirely electric. The kitchen is, and that's all from a green energy source. But that is a conscious decision. We know it's not the right decision environmentally, but we don't actually have any choice in that scenario. And I think we can apply that to all our lives. So there are absolutely things that I buy. I mean, these jeans are Levi's and they're new. That is a naughty conscious compromise because I didn't need to do that. It was an indulgence. But I say, I am actually a human who lives in this society that is barely set up for ethical living. So, I'm going to compromise on that.
And it's tricky because like we're so busy and there's so many things. It's like it's much harder to do the environmental choice. And I think or it's either much harder or it's more expensive. And so we're already set up for failure as a public to try and make a difference. So and one of the things actually that I'd love to hear your opinion on before we wrap up is how a big topic in the food world about environmentalism is vegan and plant-based eating, and there seems to be this big narrative that you can only be environmental if you eat 100% plants. I personally don't agree with that. But I wanted to hear, because you're working with a restaurant, but obviously we're here on a farm that, for all I know, is just producing
plants. Cattle. We have cattle here as well. Our neighbours' cattle are here, and we may have pigs and we have lamb. In fact, all our lamb's produced here as well. I think mixed farming is very important. I think how we produce meat really matters. We absolutely need to eat hardly any meat at all, and that's the mindset we have to get into. And nearly all our dishes are based around meat being the last part of the dish, And that's how I order. I'm always asking people. I'll look at a menu, and it's the dauphinoise with the lamb that I want. It's not the lamb; it's the dauphinoise. I can hear that that's a beautiful dish. And so I'm often, you kind of choose what the dish is built around, not the meat, generally, unless you're getting a steak, with chips, that simple. When it comes to veganism, I mean, we don't talk about it on the menu because I think a dish should just be a dish, whether it's vegetarian, vegan or meat-based, and I want people to eat in that way. I often eat vegan dishes, but they're just because that's how the dish is made. I have huge concerns about the ultra processed food industry and veganism, and I think finally it's being talked about. But Linda McCartney 20 years ago, just ultra processed food being sold as this solution. I mean, it's just shocking bullshit and really upsetting and very depressing. It makes me really quite furious.
But the one thing I would say that to pick up on it and kind of hit the nail on the head is the ultra processed food. It doesn't matter whether you're trying to like for me, it's like I want people to be able to eat a diet that they choose. But I always think the problem comes back to ultra processed food, whether it's ultra processed meat or ultra processed like vegan food or anything like that. I just feel like we should that isn't even food.
Yeah.
And
most
a lot of things
in supermarkets is not food.
Or you read the back of the packet, it says like foodstuffs. What on earth is a foodstuff? Like
I'd never seen that one. It's actually food package.
It's food, and a lot of the ingredients are classed as foodstuffs that are used because
I might start heading our menu with foodstuffs.
Yeah, exactly. But they're derived from all sorts of
oh my God.
weird processes.
How the hell did they get away with that?
I know.
It's the food industry, the lobbying. It's horrific, isn't it? Supermarkets rarely sell food. I just can't believe what they're selling. It's absolutely horrifying. And the amount of ultra-processed food in there is just terrifying.
So what do you see? Like, just what do you see needs to happen here in the UK? Because obviously this is a global world. But what can we do in the UK to start?
Well, we need a food policy from the government. We need a very clear food policy, and we absolutely need a tax on ultra-processed food. We need to curb supermarkets and encourage the high street. We need to support farmers properly so they're paid for their food, not all the bodies in between ending up with a supermarket making millions of pounds. How the hell that system changes, I don't know. I mean, Henry Dimbleby had a very interesting policy that I hope and I think the government are interested in. But if we could just create a narrative, what I have always tried to teach my daughter is it's about whole food. So all that matters is it's whole and that we don't eat too much of it. And so eat less, more plant-based, whole food. It's really basic to me. It seems really simple. So eat all the fat on the lamb. Eat all of it. There's nothing wrong with anything. All its intestines, anything you want to eat it all. Eat a whole packet of butter because it's a whole natural product. Don't worry about any of that stuff, and you're not going to get large. You're not going to get unhealthy as long as you're not eating masses of anything. Eat till you're full. It's so simple.
It's so nice to hear that, because all of these people that like diets and fads and stuff, it's like they're trying to make something complicated even more complicated. But like for me, just nothing beats going to the garden, picking some things, cooking it, tasting the flavors. It is so simple.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to try and encourage.
Yeah. It's fun though. It's the best way to cook and eat. It's the most delicious and best. And my chef's cooking in the kitchen, purpose, mastery and autonomy. So there they are, learning, developing, feeling good about themselves. And why we're so missing that from our kitchens at home, where you're feeling yourself being fed well, you're developing your cooking skills, you're getting appreciation from your family, you're all doing it together. Hopefully you're in that scenario. Not everybody is. It's such a loss. It's such a loss to us as humans. As you said right at the beginning, what did you say about restaurants? They're restorative.
Restorative, yeah.
It's all part of it. Food has been fundamental. It's what's driven us and motivated us to keep going in life. And we've brought it down to these corporations owning and controlling how we eat. It's completely terrifying.
I think one of my favourite quotes is the health of a society reflects the health of its soil.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really lovely way of looking at it. And I honestly think that if we start in the home kitchen and we create our own restorative, nourishing food using whole food stuff, either from an allotment or a local farm or anything like that, I think what we need is a little bit of a home cooking revolution.
So you were saying that, how much that's depleted in our society, and it is absolutely shocking. And what about kids in school? And I completely agree. We ought to have actual sit-down meals in school where they're eating proper food, where they have to lay the table, clear the table, sit together and converse.
And wash up.
And wash up, yeah. And maybe even join in the cooking and be managed around that, because often that's not happening at home. But one of the things I'm really cautious about, and it makes me very cross, and endless conferences, that people, there's always the question, what about the children? If only we educated the children, society would change. And it makes me so angry, because I want to turn around and go, no, it's you. It's us. Yeah. We're the adults. Stop putting it on their shoulders. We need to change, and then it will follow. That our behaviour towards them will change. But you don't, like, just educating kids in schools is not going to change it, and it's not their fault, and it's too late. So stop putting it on them. Like, it's like a sort of get out clause. It
is.
If only the kids would change, everything would be fine.
Stupid kids.
You also asked about the pizza restaurant, and I kind of got stuck on the fish and chip shop.
That's right.
The pizza restaurant. So the team really wanted to do pizza. When we decided we couldn't do fish and chips, I went on holiday. When I came back, they said, we've decided we're doing a pizza restaurant. And I said, if that makes you happy and you will stay with me forever and ever, you have a pizza restaurant. I'm very lucky to be able to say that. So, I mean, either way, we were doing this investment into the restaurant. That's what they chose. And now we're in the dilemma of what kind of oven. That's really hard, actually, from an ecological point of view. And I think we're going to settle on an electric, which is kind of a bit taboo. Yeah.
But the flavour.
Everyone we talk to says, it doesn't really make that much difference. You can make a wood flavour in just the ingredients you're using. So if we've got a big green egg, if we smoke the aubergines on it, you'll get that kind of woody flavour in there.
True.
It doesn't really make any difference.
True.
I don't think it's the same. It's not quite the same as when you're doing it at home.